So, it has come to my attention that some of you would like to know about dry boxing. This is an interesting topic. It's
not to be confused with dry docking.
What's dry docking?
That's when you take a dump with no water.
Okay, so yeah, a lot of people want to know about dry boxing. Someone who I respect in the industry called me a bullshit artist because I mentioned dry boxing. Dry boxing is very simple. You ever get a Maduro that's like so gunky? Let me go in my handy dandy. Thank you, Scott, for making this for me. Let's pick out the gunkiest. What is this? Here. Here's an añejo. I wouldn't quite call this gunky, but when you can put your fingertip into the wrapper and it doesn't, it's like has give, spongy, it looks oily, the wrapper's super thick. You can see that the wrapper covers like certain like an eighth of a centimeter cut. Oh, here. I mean, this is gunky. You know? Can you see that? It's gunky. Anyway, the point is, a lot of these super heavy Maduros that we're starting to really like the Good Life, for instance. A lot of you have smoked the Good Life, so I'll use that as an example. The Good Life was the gunkiest wrapper ever, right? When they first got here, we could barely smoke them. I was like, wow, we need to dry these things out. That's dry boxing. Something comes overly humidified, you got to dry box it. Now, the gauges and stuff, they're great. Shout out to my people over at Humidimeter. I always have trouble saying that. Shout out to Luigi over there. Dude, that'll tell you how much humidity's inside, but that's not that important. Like, I'll give you an example, okay? I've been told that a certain company in this industry rolls their cigars with the following method. They roll it, put it in a binder, but they do not put the wrapper on it. They let the cigar then dry out. They dry age it. Why do they do this? They want to achieve combustibility when you smoke that cigar. I don't know why that's so hard for some people to understand, okay? They want to achieve combustibility. They may want it to burn faster, so you have to smoke more, stuff like that. Okay, so they dry that out. Then they take the wrapper leaf months later, throw it in the water or the tea, whatever they're using, and roll it wet. And then they let it dry. And you can spot some of these types of cigars. They look pruny at times. The skin will look pruny. So that is a method, and it's a pretty cool one, and it's something that I actually prefer, and I think more companies should do it. That's just me, though. Okay, so why? And I laughed when my friend told me this. Like, oh, he's like, you speak with such authority, but you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And I'm like, what? He was like, what's dry boxing? I've been in this industry 20 years. I've never heard of that. I'm like, dude, it's a thing. I just made it up, but it's a thing. I mean, we just gave it a name, right? That's all we did. I think for years people have gotten these gunky Maduros, and you like almost through inclination or instinct, you would let that dry out. If you try to smoke one, let's say you buy a $5, you try to smoke one, and it's hot. It's very wet. You can tell it's wet. I would imagine you would leave a few of those out for a few days on the counter, see what happens to them. So there are some things that you should be dry aging. I've heard Lee Mack talk about this too. He's actually the only other person I've heard mention this. I really wonder what a couple of my other industry friends think of this. I'll try to ask them and get back to you on this. But I wonder what Brian Glenn is such a stickler for how he stores his cigars. Everything has to be perfect, acclimated, the whole deal. And so I'd love to get his take on it. I'd also love to hear what Jeremy thinks about it. Jeremy's got one of those cooladors. And I think Brian's huge thing is a coolador, like a big one. So, and those guys have a luxury that I just don't have, okay? I just don't believe it. Look, that's great, and I think that's awesome. I have too many cigars for that. I'm a cooler guy. And yeah. And I have a whole system. We've been through this on our aging video. So go back and watch that. But if you get a cigar that's wet, basically, or too gunky, it's just not smoking right, the combustibility is not there, I urge you to leave it outside of your humidor for a few days. Check it. Make sure it's not cracking or anything, okay? If it gets too dried out, you can put it back in a humidor, but I do believe this is going to make the cigar smoke better. I've proven it over time, and the Good Life was probably my biggest proof that, hey, some cigars need to be aged without humidity for a little while so that they can become combustible. And then when they hit that sweet spot. And see, I feel like we talked about Plume before too, and Plume, I think, is a product of that. I don't think Plume has to come out in 6 years. I think it can come out very quickly if you're playing with. And so I'm looking for a scientist or someone that understands biology that I'm going to sit down and really chop this stuff up with about Plume and getting things out of cigars and really ripening cigars, okay? So I'm working on that. But for dry boxing, that's what it is. Dry aging, that's what it is. You just leave it out because it's too wet to smoke. Hashtag We Are Privada. Leave a comment below if you've ever dry aged a cigar. Leave a comment below if you haven't.